How you guys doing today? I am feeling disorganized. I have a bunch of stuff. None of it is organized. I feel like I did a walkabout video today, and looking back on it, it felt disorganized. Disorganized is exactly the word. I just feel like it was kind of word salady. I think I got my point across at the end of the day. Like, it's about the housing market, right? It's about how the billionaire class is just buying up the housing market. And I keep having the same kind of conversation with people. People who are like, they're well-meaning. I think they believe what they're saying. I don't think they're grifters, right? I don't think they're bad people. I think they are actually interested. They want to believe that the housing market is going to correct itself. I think that's really what it comes down to, right? They want to believe that the housing market is actually going to correct itself. And they're viewing this downturn, right? Tiff Macklin stood up in front of us and he said, we're going to raise the interest rate and that's going to drop prices, and then I'll be able to get that home. I'll be able to get that house, you know? I've always wanted a house and I'll be able to go get it finally, you know? It's always been my dream to own my own home, right? Well, too bad. The reason why the housing market is dipping is because the interest rate has risen, right? It is true. The interest rate has risen, and so prices have gone down, but the prices aren't going down for you, right? The prices aren't going down so that you can afford it. The prices aren't going down. Tiffany never lies. I like that. I don't know why I haven't connected. Tiff Macklin, man, what a name, eh? The prices are going down because the interest rates have gone up and chased smaller players out of the market. These smaller players, your mom, your dad, right, your buddies, right, are being forced to sell because they were on the line in the first place, right? They were barely making it work in the first place. And now that the interest rate is going up and up and up and up and up, right, they can no longer afford the payment. So they're being forced to sell. Who are they selling to? Are they selling it to your mom? Like, is your mom turning around and selling the house to another mom, right? Is there some young couple who's making $50,000 in Vancouver? I wonder if I actually have this article. I saw it today. In Vancouver, you need to have 300,000. Yeah, here it is. You'll need a household income of over 320K to afford a home in Vancouver, right? So even as the housing prices are coming down, if you don't have a household income of over 320K, get fucked. Get completely fucked. Get completely fucked. Too bad for you. Right? So as people who are making less than 320K, if you had a mortgage, well, now you have to sell. Why? Because your interest rate went up and you can no longer afford the payment. Right? Driving prices down because you have a bunch of people who are selling their assets that they can no longer afford thanks to a rising interest rate. And who are they selling to? Well, they're not selling to anyone who's making less than 320K, right? So who are they selling to? They're selling to BlackRock. They're selling to multinational developers. They're selling to the billionaire class, right? Yeah. And they show you a luxury home. 320K gets you a fixer-upper. Exactly. Good to see you all, by the way. Kea, Radio Halifax, Compton. Good to see you. What's up, bitches, to you, Compton. This should become our formal greeting. Welcome all to the Canadian Commie. And a grand what up, bitches, to you today. Boop. And I'm just having these conversations. Mr. Moon, good to see you again. I just keep having the same kind of conversation, and I have to constantly remind myself that what I am seeing isn't malicious. I think that's the thing. That the conversation I have over and over and over again, it isn't with someone who's snidely sneering and going, and trying to dunk on me. That's not the sense I'm getting from these people. The sense that I'm getting from these people is that they are not even naively. That's too mean. Even that's too mean. But they definitely are optimistically clinging hold to the idea that the housing prices are coming down. This is all going to be corrected. It's this, that sure, things got a little crazy for just a little moment, but now things are going to settle back down. The housing market's going to restabilize, and I'll be able to afford the home that I've always dreamed to have. That the sad truth of when I am talking to the people who are desperately clinging to this idea is that I'm watching people who are clinging hold to the last threads of hope. That they want to believe that in their lifetime it is going to happen. They're going to get that home. And honestly, I can't hate them for it. You know? I can't hate them for it. Housing in Australia is totally fucked. It's across the spectrum. This is the capitalist system. I got that article right here, Isaac. We'll be talking more about that. It's across the system because capitalism is, I shouldn't say is, capitalism has collapsed. Like, we don't actually live in a capitalist system any longer. That the system is actually a form of neo-feudalism right now. That it's not a capitalist model. That a capitalist model would actually say, like, if we were living in a free market capitalist system, we would actually have competition, right? There is no competition in the market anymore. There are monopolists who own the market, cartels that own the market, and moreover, those cartels are propped up by the state. That there's been a merger of the state and the private sector, right? Which Mussolini himself called fascism, right? That it's not actually possible for any of these institutions to actually collapse. There is no meaningful competition in any industry, in any sector. There are bigger players, and all of the small fish now are being carved out. That's what's happening over this period of time. That the raising interest rate, coupled with the subsidies that big industry is enjoying, the highest profits ever, record-breaking profits happening right now, right? It's a return to feudalism. That the people who were at the top of the capitalist hierarchy are now the new kings and queens and princes of a feudal country. And that feudal country is Canada, the United States, right? And it's going to be across Europe and Australia. because capitalism itself has ceased to be a actual capitalist system, right? Any of the rhetoric, any of the ideology, any of the points that the capitalist would use in defense of the capitalist system, none of that exists, right? None of that exists. That politicians operate as courtiers, as the messengers of the edicts that are laid out by the owners of the society. In Canada, that would be people like the Westons, the Thompsons, the Irvings, Joseph Sy, right? Yep. Varoufakis is good on this. Yep. Techno-feudalism. He's talked about this. Yep. And I think he's accurate. Before Varoufakis, I was calling it neo-feudalism, but his techno-feudalism, I think, is a pretty accurate way of describing what it's like and how it is. And because the state is not responding rationally to the needs of the populace, it's essentially a Game of Thrones style situation where the only thing that the peasants can actually do in order to be heard and perhaps get the owners of the society to respond to them is revolt. It's the only thing we have left. These democratic systems no longer respond to us. They're not interested in responding to us. If you are using them, for example, Isabella Gamp here in the city of Toronto is running for mayor. She's the trans woman who I organize protests with. We've shut down many streets, including recently in front of John Tory's house. And we have no illusions about her actually winning, because that's not how it works, right? What we are hoping, all we are hoping for, is to bring awareness, to get her on a stage somewhere, and get her in a position where they can no longer ignore her, and get enough advocacy groups and get enough energy behind her in order to legitimize her as a figure in the conversation, in order to get a raise for disabled people on ODSP. Very simple and very straightforward, right? That's the hope, that it's a form of protest. And I think that's the best the populace can get through the system of democracy, if you want to call this a democracy, that we have access to. And outside of that, it's protest surrounding the halls of power. And ultimately revolution, because this is a feudal society now, and the laws and the rules and the strictures and all of this is going to get much worse. That the market is very steadily just going to be, if it already isn't, 2 or 3 big players negotiating with one another, using the democratic system as an apparatus by which to peacefully come to agreements with one another, right? That's literally all it is. That the idea that exists within the mind of the populace. Good to see you, Christopher. Good to see you. The idea that exists in the mind of the populace that, oh, we're going to vote for this person and they're going to go to this place and fight for our interests and all of that. That's a pipe dream. You want to talk about utopian visions. You want to talk about like a utopian view of how the structure actually looks, right? That there's nothing more utopian than that idea. The idea that you're going to go vote for a candidate and that candidate is actually going to respond rationally to your needs. Right? That doesn't exist anymore. And I'm more or less of the opinion that we've recently watched, not a purging per se, but definitely like a self resignation. Like I've seen this throughout the NDP recently. I've seen it a bit in the Liberal Party, where there are people who are resigning. Recently, my representative, Rima Burns-McGowan, she resigned. We had Joel Harden decline to run for the leadership of the NDP. You've even got, like, in the Green Party, Dimitri Lascaris, right, refusing to run again. And I think it's because they've steadily realized more and more that it's not a system that's responding rationally, and it can't respond rationally. That if you attempted to respond rationally, you will be chased out of the political system, right? And there are very many mechanisms that people with the amount of power we've given can use to lean on people like this. Yep. During the pandemic, the government agreed you need at least $2,000 a month to live. Disabled people get only about $1,100. Yeah, exactly. No, exactly. Like, it's been frozen. And for God's sakes, like, the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, has said on many occasions, on camera, in public, you can find it, it's very easy to find, that disabled people should just go get jobs. And the people who defend this are detached psychopaths. Like, there's no other way to describe them, right? That they literally are detached from reality, and saying the most childish and insipid things that can be said. Like, they don't know what disability looks like. Like, they literally don't know what a disabled person is. They don't understand the concept of disability and the concept of a person with having a disability and what that actually looks like and what it means to have a disability, right? Like, they literally have no contemplation or any idea of what that looks like. And because we're in a society that worships money, right? It's the worship of money that matters the most. Because we're in this society that exclusively worships money. We don't care about anything else. If it doesn't make money, then it's invalid from the outset, right? So things like the public healthcare system, the library system, public transit, right? None of this makes money for the oligarch class, and so it's illegitimate, and should be privatized or dismantled. And what we are seeing in the disabled community, and there are articles after article about this coming through and coming up, is that the solution that's being offered to people with disabilities is the medically assisted dying program. Like, literally, these people are being told, go get a job or die. That's literally what they're being told. And we pretend as though we live in a civilized society. That's the joke, if you ask me. Like, people pretend like this is a civilized society. I don't see it. How is this a civilized society? Because we have people on television who talk very properly, right? That seems to be the only thing that matters, right? That if you're on television and you're talking very seriously and you're talking very properly and you look into the camera and you talk like this, or if you're like Jordan Peterson, right, and you say the most spite-filled, hate-filled stuff, but you use a thesaurus while you say it, right, like Rex Murphy or Ben Shapiro, then I guess you're civilized, right? While espousing a doctrine of exclusion and homelessness. Like, yeah, they lied about climate change. Yeah, we can get into the whole climate change thing. Today is going to be a weird, disorganized one, guys. I mean, I'm all over the place. Like, are we going to get to a point in our society where we realize these people are psychopaths? Hey, Anemone, how you doing? Good to see you. Like, what I am seeing is a society that kind of believes, like they generally believe in the idea that we are all in this together. Like, there is still segments of the society, even in progressive circles, even in, like, NDP circles, where they believe that the ruling class is actually interested in nation building or building a civilization or having a stable society. They don't want to accept what's patently obvious and patently true, that the people who own this place have become psychopaths, or are making it obvious that they're psychopaths, right? Yeah, Transylvanian. Yeah, we're not. The rich have bunkers and private armies, right? And private hospitals and private this and private that. That's the reason why they don't want to pay for all of these public services anymore, right? We gave them all the money, right? Through this grift of trickle-down economics. And now they're turning around and saying, oh yeah, about that whole trickle-down part, right? So they're destroying the public sector, right? They're rendering the population homeless. It's very homeless and defenseless. Hey Watson, how you doing? How you guys all doing? I'm so glad you guys are all here. And for goodness sakes, we even have like leaks, like the Bank of America leak, where they outright were saying like we need to destroy the working class, we need to destabilize them in order to drive wages down, right? That we're in a very virulent, powerful class war, but we're not really fighting back. You know, that's the part about it, is that the capitalists know that they're in a class war, right? That's why they buy the political class. Hey Major, how you doing, bud? That's why they buy the political class. That's why they buy the media, right? That's why they buy they use their wealth and power to control narratives and to control what can be said in the public sector. That's how they roll and what they're doing. And they're using that power to suppress channels like mine, to suppress things on YouTube, to suppress things on social media, right? To spread around disinformation campaigns and do all of this kind of stuff, because they understand that it's a war. And it's a war that they intend to win, right? Meanwhile, the working class is walking around thinking that they can negotiate with these guys. Like that's the part that makes it absolutely adorable to me. That unions and advocacy groups and all of this, right, are all just saying like, oh, we're going to write a letter, right? Oh, we'll write a letter. We'll send around a petition, right? We'll go to the negotiating table, right? We'll have conversations and debate, right? Yeah, that's right. Okay, buddy, you got it. Yeah, it's a shame Joel Harden didn't want to run for leader. Yeah, I was not surprised when it happened, right? Like, Joel Harden is one of the few voices that actually stand up in the parliament and tell the truth. So it's very unlikely that the NDP will let him be the leader of the party. Bruno Latour's Down to Earth really spoke to me. I'm not familiar with it. Political power grows out of the barrel of a gun. I mean, that's a Mao Zedong quote. And Mao Zedong fought an imperial war. Putin announced he will empower poor third world countries to fight capitalism so they get out of their misery. I mean, this is more or less the Chinese strategy, right? That Putin is using military language in order to do it, in order to make the point. You can hear this, eh? I got a little playful pug. That's right, Milo. Milo's all about fighting the class war. He wants to fight the class war so badly, you guys. Right? He wants to get in there. Get his hands dirty. I have to admit, I'm feeling quite sad these days. You know? I try to pretend like that's not the case. I'm trying to stay aloof and above it. I'm trying to remain optimistic, you know, in my own way, while still telling the truth about what's happening. It's hard to have these conversations with people who are clinging on to false hope. That's really what it is. It's hard to have these conversations with people who are clinging on to false hope, who still want to believe that their idea of how the system should be is how the system actually is. And they don't want to deal with the reality. They're still in a form of denial. They don't want to deal with the reality that the system has already collapsed. It's already abandoned them. It's tough. Let's not make Putin into a hero he isn't. Yet he's not a communist. He's still a liberal. That's a tough one to say, in fact, actually. I'm not trying to say that Putin is a communist, but is he a liberal? Like, what is Putin right now? Like, what is he? I do think that if it was up to Putin himself, like if somebody walked up to Putin when he first became the leader of Russia and said, "What do you want for Russia? Where do you want this nation to be positioned?" He would have very clearly said, "I want to be part of NATO. I want to be part of the Western system. I want to be part of the..." Exactly. He tried to join the imperialist West, become part of the club. Yeah, but the West's short-sighted Russophobia and unwillingness to share spoils with Russia pushed him to side with the global South. I think that's exactly correct. That's exactly correct. That Putin, what Putin is doing is smart, right? But it's opportunistic. I think that's really what it comes down to, is that he's not doing it because he's looking at the capitalists and going, what a disgraceful system of betrayal and slavery, and oh my God, we need to come up with a better way to run a nation and all of this. He's doing it out of necessity. Like, very, very straightforwardly. He's just looking at the game board and saying, well, I got rejected from NATO, so that dream is dead. The Americans are literally fomenting war on my border, right? So that dream is dead. Where else can I go? Where's the pivot? And I will say this of Putin, I think that he is managing the pivot very well. I think that he's doing a good job of leading and guiding his nation. And I think there's also a clarity amongst his own base and his own group that we do indeed need to do this, right? That perhaps there is a bit of wishing like that we could still be part of the American system or the Western kind of thing, but I think that everybody sees the writing on the wall now in Russia, and so the transition and the pivot has been pretty well done, and I think that the Chinese have been pretty accommodating in this regard, right? Like that. The Chinese could really be putting the screws on Russia, right? As Russia is making this pivot that they're forced to make, right? China could be playing the American game, right? And trying to squeeze out as much as they can from Russia. But it doesn't look like that's how they're playing it. It really does look like the way China is playing it with Russia is that they're saying to Russia, oh, an unfortunate situation for you. Let's get you into the fold. That the Chinese, I think, see this as an opportunity to strengthen their own position simply through acts of open friendship. And certainly they're not going to give the farm away to the Russians, right? But they're not really squeezing the Russians. They're not leveraging the position, right? They're committed to this idea of win-win diplomacy, right? They're committed to this idea of win-win diplomacy. And I think that's actually really working out for them. And I mean, there is something to be said about the reality that China is also faced under, which is, I have a really cool picture. There it is. Like, China is also experiencing this, right? What you guys are looking at is the U.S. controls U.S. military bases around the world, right? Like, this is why I scoff at the idea that when people say, like, well, Russia and China are also imperial powers. Are they? Are they really? Like, where's all of the military bases around the world for China, right? Where's the Chinese military bases in all of this, right? Like, man, you know what? China really shouldn't have built all these military bases like right. They shouldn't have built their country so close to our military bases, right? Like, if you're Iran, look how terrifying it must be to be Iran during all of this, right? Military base in Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan, Afghanistan. You got one in the Cyprus. You got some. You got Libya, Oman, like all over the place, right? Like Saudi Arabia. There's 11 American military bases in Saudi Arabia. Where's this line? Iraq has 6, right? If you're Iran, freedom dispensers. That's right, Ligandese. Freedom dispensers. Like the China has every reason to want Russia to be a strong ally, right? And you can see pretty closely. This is actually a pretty decent map of like where the world powers are being drawn, right? Like, you take a look at it. Where are there no military bases? There's no military bases in India, right? There's no military bases in Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Myanmar, Bangladesh, China, Kazakhstan, right? There's no military bases in Venezuela, right? There's a military base in Cuba, Guantanamo Bay, right? I sometimes think that the reason why the Americans have never actually just rolled into Cuba and just destroyed it is because of that military base that they forced the Cubans to have. Yep. Putin calls the West totalitarian, criticizes it for insufficient free speech, censoring RT, and insufficient free trade, sanctioning, weaponizing the dollar. This is typical liberal rhetoric. I mean, again, I don't see it as like, I don't see Putin as a liberal, right? I don't think he has an ideology, right? I think his ideology is, if you tried to peg him with an actual ideology, I think nationalist is probably the closest you could ever get. That he definitely is like Russia. We need to make sure that Russia is okay. Certainly I want to be on the top of it. Certainly I want to be doing the best, right? But Russia is where it's at. Yeah, of course, that may just be a rhetorical strategy chosen to disarm the West with its own ideological weapons. I mean, it seems to me like it's not hard to defeat the West rhetorically, right? Like they don't have a moral position. They don't actually have a leg to stand on any longer, right? Putin is a right-wing oligarchic nationalist. Yeah, I think that's pretty close to the mark. Yeah, like he definitely works within the oligarchy that exists. He definitely works with the oligarchy. Some critics of Putin say that he doesn't like the oligarchy very much, and that he's done things against them. And I mean, we've got video of Putin. Like, there'll be like a factory that gets shut down, and he'll just go in and be like, get this factory going again, right? Like, I don't give a shit about your stupid dispute. And if one actually adopts the liberal ideological framework, he's right. Russia is more liberal today than the West is, and the global South sees the clear hypocrisy on display by the West. Yeah, I mean, yeah, he is an oligarch. He has family members that are oligarchs. Yeah, if he wasn't an oligarch, he wouldn't have gotten into power in the kind of neoliberal order in the first place. That for sure is true. Like, that for sure is true. I'll be very interested to see what happens in Russia as things move forward. Can the oligarchy be sustained? That's something that I think about Russia all the time. right? Can the oligarchy be sustained, given the configuration, given the way that the society is moving away from the West, right? I mean, and the center of the oligarchy is certainly in America, right? It's certainly the Western capitalist oligarchy, right? Is definitely where that power emanates from. But as that power recedes, and as Chinese power begins to spread throughout the globe, right? And say what you like about China, it's not an oligarchy, right? They have wealthy capitalists, that for sure is true, but those wealthy capitalists are not running the show, right? Like I cannot be convinced that the oligarchs are running the show in China, or that the wealthy billionaires are running the show in China. Can this oligarchy be sustained? From what I've seen, he still fundamentally believes in market economics, private enterprise. The Russian state has not undertaken sweeping nationalization, that's true. He's kept it a primarily market system, yeah, with some notable exceptions like state-owned fossil fuel monopoly Gazprom, military industry state-owned monopoly Rostec, etc. Yeah, and I mean, it just seems to me like if this was 100, yeah, I know, Watson, you've got a very dim view of Putin. If this was 100 years ago, Putin would have been an avid supporter of the Tsar and a Black Hundreds member. Yeah, may very well be the case. May very well be the case. I feel like, but this is the thing, like, I feel like Putin is actually a much more complex figure than this. And I think that he's a complex figure in, like, he's a complex figure in a complex time. And I get the general sense from him that he's largely an opportunist, that if he was living in the Soviet Union, he would have been a communist, right? And if he's, it's liberal democracy, okay, well then viva liberal democracy, right? And I don't see him as being an ideologue, right? I don't think he cares that much about the ideologies. I don't think he's that interested. I think he has a very pragmatic view, and I think he views himself as simply being the man with his hand on the rudder, and all he really wants to all he really wants is to keep his hand on the rudder and get Russia through this tumultuous time, while also having a nice, position for himself and his own family. Like, let's not fool ourselves. Like, he would like his own family to succeed and thrive for sure. Familial politics always supersedes national politics and local politics. Familial politics is always the most important. Let's not fool ourselves. And so Putin's trying to get through this tumultuous period of time, and he's following the path of least resistance in order to do it, while simultaneously making large decisions that I think can be argued he has been forced to make, like the invasion of Ukraine, the invasion of Georgia, right? I feel like these are moments he was forced into. I don't think that he sat there and gleefully, giddily leapt at the opportunity to do so. I think that I think his own populace and his own cabinet brought him to it, and he was forced into these decisions, given the configuration of what happened. So he's not pursuing any of this through ideological, like he's not sitting there the way that Stalin sat there when he decided to do land reform, right? When Stalin did land reform, he was following an ideology, right? Like he wrote a whole ideological treaty on it, and he justified the going after the kulaks, pursuing land reform through through the ideology of communism and the ideology of Marxism. Whereas someone like Putin would basically look at what the kulaks were doing in the kulak system and would be just like, okay, well, that's the system. Who's in charge here? We'll negotiate with you, right? Because he's fundamentally an opportunist, right? He doesn't see the need to change this because there's nobody pressuring him to do so, right? Oh, I didn't say it was meaningless, but you're responding to Transylvanian. Oh, Tinker asking the big questions. John, do you think we'll make it as a species? Brutal truth, please. I think the only important thing for me to say to that, Tinker, is that I think we can. I think we can. We can decide. We can decide. We can all make the decision as adults, right, on behalf of future generations, that we're going to make it, right? And there are very obvious and clear things that we can do to pursue a path that is going to make it, right? Very, very obvious things, like turn off the lights at Times Square, right? End this cryptocurrency bullshit, end this NFT nonsense, right? Do a hard transition into renewable energy. Forget about these ideas of like literally our entire society could be planting trees right now. Like literally, everybody could be. We could get everybody out of these stupid offices that are doing these meaningless office jobs that achieve nothing for anyone, nothing important whatsoever except shuffling papers from one another, and everybody's job could literally be planting trees, tending gardens, right? We could be planting gardens all throughout. I've got a graveyard over here. We could be planting gardens all throughout that. There's lawns all the way around here. We could be planting gardens all the way through that. Our cities could become gigantic gardens, right? Like there's the only thing that's stopping us is that we just refuse to do it. And the people who currently have power are completely disincentivized to create that kind of thing because they worship money, right? And it is possible. Like, it's possible that we all come to our senses and we all realize that, wait, money isn't a thing. This whole idea that we should worship money first and foremost is childish and stupid, frankly. And we could instead demand a rational response to what the environment is obviously demanding of us. What our creator, literally the earth, the rules that it's put in place, and what it's demanding. We could do it. We could do it. And it would actually be easier than you think it would be, right? This is something that I always say. Like, everybody's like, oh, it's going to be a complex and what a to mine all that. I actually think it would be easier than you think, right? That step one would be ignore the capitalists, right? Like, as long as the capitalists remain in the conversation, and as long as we treat them as though they have any legitimacy whatsoever, right? Then they're constantly going to get in the way of the conversation, right? But if we actually grow up and realize, like, oh, we can just ignore these guys, right? Like, if we all just agreed, like, oh, these guys are donating money to this guy, so don't support him at all. Oh, they're doing this, so stop. Like, the entire system relies on our participation with it. And as long as we're caught in this manic hysteria of money worship, where we look at people like Andrew Tate saying something like, what color's your Bugatti? And instead of looking at him like the weird little troll creature he is, we actually keep saying, like, oh yeah, here's a guy to get any kind of advice from, right? As long as we keep looking at people like Kim Kardashian, whose only reason for existing and the only way that she makes wealth is simply by being the eye of the storm of a capitalist market scheme, right? As long as we keep empowering worthless people who provide no value and pretending as though money, it justifies itself, then yeah, we're going to wipe ourselves out. Like, and it's fairly straightforward. Like, it's fairly straightforward. But ultimately, the choice is ours as a species. Ultimately, the choice is ours. We can decide to stop this manic craze, right? Just as easily as we all just stopped dealing with Game of Thrones, right? Like, this analogy is a bit foolish, but I think it's tight. Here in Canada, there were literally billboards everywhere that said "We the North," right? Part of our culture had become intertwined intrinsically with Game of Thrones. That Game of Thrones was a cultural phenomenon that everyone was on board with. It was politicians were wearing the hats. Famous people were "We the North," right? Our championship NBA team walking around, "We the North," all this kind of stuff, right? Then the final season of Game of Thrones came out. Literally the next day, it was all gone. Just gone. Like, literally, we just stopped participating in it. And we viewed the people who were participating in it as losers. And just with a kind of disdain. That if you were literally still walking around being like, yeah, "We the North," after that season, people kind of looked at you side-eyed. And we could do that with capitalism, right? We could definitely do that. And we just have not yet got to a place, and I was talking about this earlier with the housing market, right? And why it makes me kind of sad. And I think it ties in pretty tightly to this, which is that people want it to work. People want to believe that their idea of it, or that the promise of it, can still manifest and can still come in and can still be part of the conversation. And they don't want to accept that the system has delegitimized itself. Like, it's completely delegitimized, right? Like, as illegitimate as the government that Emperor Palpatine had. Like, as illegitimate as King John's or Prince John's reign over Robin Hood, right? As illegitimate as any of these tyrant kings, right? You don't need to follow the laws of a suicidal nation. You don't. There's no such, like, Voldemort's laws don't matter, right? Like, you don't. The only reason you need to bother with them is out of fear of physical repercussion, right? And, like, eventually the society, and you made another comment here that ties into this. Yeah, I was thinking people came out over candidate mandates, but nobody cares about the capitalist death cult. No. This seems people don't care. In the past week, I've seen people fighting each other over parking and other stupid stuff. This is part of the decline, right? This is part of the decline, is that because people don't have a perspective of how the society is actually structured, right? People are lashing out against what their immediate connection is. Like, why do you think there's this many school shootings happening? Like, why is it school shootings? Right? Like, sure, there are other locations and all of this, but the number one is school shootings. And it's because there's these kids who understand that the school is an institution that they're being forced through, and they understand that when they come out the other side of this institution they've been forced into, they're being completely abandoned, right? And they have no future, right? But they don't recognize the structure of the capitalist system. They don't understand that there's an ownership class that owns everything, right? And that is structuring the system to be this way for their own benefit because they worship money. They don't understand that. all they understand is this institution is illegitimate and I'm going to strike out against it. And you're seeing that kind of thing happening over and over and over again. That the core issue that we're facing is a unwillingness or a inability to understand where the core central crisis actually lies. And the core central crisis lies in the capitalist death cult. That the energy of desperation and frustration and anger that exists throughout the West is currently aimless. And it is being galvanized by Nazis, Christian theocrats and fascists in the United States, right? Much like it was in Germany, right? That anger is being galvanized and it's being directed. And there doesn't seem to be anyone outside of myself and a couple of other disparate voices who are attempting to direct that energy towards the actual problem, which is obviously the owners of the society, but even more importantly than that, the structure of the society itself, right? That the death cult is happy to create cults of personality, like they've done with Trump. They're happy to point at someone like Trump and be like, Trump is the problem. Look at Trump. Trumpity Trump, 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 Trump. Because then they can they can deflect away from the actual structure of the system itself, and ensure that we never actually recognize or realize that Trump is just one of many, and that if Trump goes, there's another Trump right behind him. Like Trump's a bit of an oddball character, but he's not really that much different than the rest of them. Not really. Like he's bombastic in his personality. He's certainly more bombastic than Biden, but in terms of his governance, he essentially governed the same way. So, if we can, as a people, acknowledge that that we should stop worshiping money, and that if we insist on worshiping something, that it should be the thing that created us in the first place, right? Then we can do it. And the solutions are actually easier than we think. That facing a declining empire is not like, I'm not sad about it. Like, there are lots of people who are lamenting the decline of the American empire. I'm not sad about that at all. That the faster the American empire declines, the better off for everybody. The number one polluter in the world is the American empire, is the American military, right? Like, so the faster it recedes, the faster it collapses, the better it will be for everybody. And the number one thing that we can all do in order to confront it is to stop participating. That it requires our participation. It needs it. It's the number one thing it needs. That's why it's so desperate to have this. No one wants to work anymore. That's why it's gaslighting us so heavily, right? Oh, we got to get people back to the office, right? We got to kick the machine up, because it requires our participation. And if we actually care about stopping this apocalypse, well, the first thing that we should do is stop participating in it. And the choice is ours. And we can do it. I genuinely believe in that. I genuinely believe it. I will always believe in that. And the reason why I will always believe in that, the idea that this apocalypse can be averted and can be stopped, I will always believe in it because I believe that the earth has power. I don't see it as a dead, inert, lifeless husk for us to harvest. I don't see it as a commodity. I don't see it as something for us to exploit and use so that we can create superpowers for ourselves. I don't see it as merely a dead rock floating in space, or even as that just pale blue dot floating in nothingness. That the earth itself is alive. The earth itself has power. The earth created a garden for us to be in, and then created us to live in it. And that's literally the truth. There's nothing spiritual about this. It's literally the case. And a system that has the power to create life, the system that has the power to create life and to create systems to sustain life, obviously has the power to heal itself. Obviously has the power to heal itself. And if the only thing that is preventing it from actually healing itself is us participating in this exploitive process of its destruction, well, then all we have to do is quit it. All we have to do is stop. And then the earth will heal itself. And incidentally, I'm going to point out, the earth will eventually heal itself. The question is whether or not we'll be here when it does it. And if we choose to continue acting this way, it will wipe us out. It will wipe us out. Make no mistake about that. Never, ever make that mistake. That there are definitely people walking around right now who believe in their heart of hearts that the earth will never wipe us out. That it will always cherish and love us, or that oh, it's just hysteria to say that the earth will wipe us out. The earth will absolutely wipe us out if we continue on this path. And so it is up to us. It is up to us. Just stop. Stop polluting. Stop pretending like you can negotiate with the earth or the sun. Stop pretending like the rules don't apply. That's something I was thinking about just today, right? Like, we're so used to the idea of the wealthy never actually facing any consequences for their crimes. Like, that if people actually insisted that that the wealthy be arrested, can you imagine the pushback that would occur through the corporate media, through these apparatus, right? They would genuinely attempt to convince the populace that the wealthy should not face consequences for their obvious overt crimes. That's definitely going to happen. Putin is a prime benefactor of the re-implementation of capitalism in its naked Russian form. The symbology Putin uses is literally Tsarist. Yeah, like I'm not really fighting you on this, Watson. Like, you're stating it a bit more firmly than I am, because I do think that, like, my position on Putin is that he's a opportunist. That he always would have worn whatever skin is around him, right? Because his goal is not to push an ideology, but to just represent the prevailing ideology of the day. But that's more or less how I view Putin. That, like, if he had have been a young burgeoning man seeking power when Stalin was around, he would have been a virulent communist, right? That if he had been around, like if he had been around during the like the rise of Eastern Orthodox Christianity and when it was at its height, he would have been like an Orthodox priestly figure, right? Like, he's just wearing the skin of power that he needs to wear. But he has no ideology, right? He has no ideology. And I just think that he views himself as a Russian, first and foremost. You know, we only survive if capitalism goes. Certainly capitalism can no longer be in the driver's seat. Like, the worship of money. The idea that anyone at any point is actually turning to the capitalists and saying, what do you think? Like, these embarrassing figures need to be left out of the conversation completely. And we should only really listen to what they have to say to ensure that we know that we're on the right path. Because if the capitalists are against us, then we know we're doing the right thing. In my opinion, the term Stalinist is pretty meaningless. If there even is such a thing, certainly doesn't apply to the later USSR, which went very much against Stalin and his policies. Yeah, I mean, like, that to me is the great... I don't want to get into the Stalin conversation, because I feel like that bogs the chat down all the time. Speaking of bogging the chat down, ad break, I hope it's for t-shirts. Or Jordan Peterson. That's always funny when you guys get a Jordan Peterson ad. It's always the funniest to me. It's like, there's something like deeply ironic about Jordan Peterson somehow funding me. You know what I mean? Like, he's buying ad spaces and they're putting it on my content, and then you guys watch it, and then you bring it into the chat, and then we all rip on Peterson. It's great. It's fucking great. Yeah, it is a bit odd to call a system Stalinist. Like, the only critique, not the only critique, but certainly one of the major critique that I think you can levy against Stalin is the failure to erect a system that survived him. That's a lesson that I think the Chinese have taken to heart. That they really looked at what happened to Stalin and the Soviet Union post-Stalin, and they've erected a system that has some resilience. Whereas the Soviet system clearly didn't have the same kind of resilience. The public gardens in Halifax are full of ornamental plants, yet nothing eatable, which I always find odd. Like, why plant a garden and no food? Yeah, I was just thinking people came out over COVID mandates in thousands. Nobody cares about capitalist death cult because the COVID mandates are right in front of their face, right? Like people do not have a analysis of their own society. They don't, right? They're not provided with one. The news media is structured in such a way, like the news media gives you like lots of tidbits, right? It gives you lots of snapshots, right? It gives you lots of pictures. But there's no one in the news media, in the corporate news media, who's even attempting to create a meta-narrative. They're not even trying to create a meta-narrative. It's just a series of like snapshots, right? Nowhere else to go. ERs will continue to be crowded in coming months, expects emergency physician. And so they'll tell that story, right? They'll tell this story about how, there's overcrowding and all this kind of stuff, right? They won't tell you why. They won't even attempt to tell you why. They won't attempt to tell you anything about what's going on above this level or below it. They won't attempt to put it within any kind of timeline. They won't give you any historical perspective. So they're just giving you a little flash shot every single time and sort of expecting you to create this kind of meta-narrative. But you're so fucking exhausted, you're so fucking overwhelmed that you can't possibly create a meta-narrative, right? Because it takes time and effort to do these things and time to contemplate and time to think and dwell in order to put together a larger picture and create a larger meta-narrative, right? And they're completely disinterested in doing that. They want you discombobulated. They want you confused. And even better, they want you to be fearful, right? And so this snapshot reporting, right? That's why they say things like, we report, you decide, right? We report, you decide. It's a great way for them to just wash their hands of actually telling you a story, right? Telling you the story of what is happening in the healthcare system. Telling you the story of what's happening in the housing market. Telling you the story of any of this kind of stuff. And so people are just constantly bombarded with these snapshots, and it's not until something is directly in front of their face that people can rebel against it, right? Or that people feel they should rebel against it. Yeah, Cubans plant food on every space they can find, of course. I don't know why you wouldn't. Like, what we're doing is so fucking stupid. You could turn the whole world around by genuinely declaring war on climate change, conscripting all able-bodied people to do the work, like planting trees and desertification. Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, it really would only take one big push. Like, really. It would only really take one big push, right? If you nationalized your fossil fuel industry, right? If you created a rationing system, if you said we're not going to let people go hungry, we're not letting people starve, we're not letting people freeze, right? We're going to use fossil fuels to the degree that we must in terms of absolute necessity, right? In terms of food production and ensuring people have heat in order to not freeze to death, right? And then use fossil fuel production in order to actually generate new renewable programs, right? So that we can kind of continue forward in this and focusing on the things that actually matter. Fuck this EV shit, right? Focusing on public transit, focusing on building transit systems, focusing on creating systems of delivery. Like, did you guys know there used to be like milk delivery trucks that would go around and just deliver milk to people? We can do the same thing with groceries. We can do the same thing. Like, there's nothing stopping us. We're just choosing not to. We're choosing to be Luddites. We're choosing to be idiots. We're choosing to pick the most inefficient way of doing it because that's the quote-unquote free market, because it makes the most amount of money for psychopaths, right? Like, we can take control of this and reconfigure it and focus instead on efficiency for psychos. Instead, we can focus on efficiency for the usage of fossil fuels, right? And in that way, transition away from it as quickly as possible. That everything is mandated and is about reduce fossil fuel usage. Just reduce it, reduce it, reduce it. Do it less, get less, right? While simultaneously ensuring people don't fucking die en masse. And because right now the path that we're on is just exhaustion. We're just going to use it until it's exhausted. And then kind of shrug and be like, well, free market deciding, I guess. And the idea that we're like funding electric vehicles, like, are you kidding me? Like, during this period of time we're in amidst this crisis, the thing that we're focusing on is electric vehicles? Embarrassing. Yeah. I miss the 90s. You only missed the 90s because you were a kid. There's a lot of angst and rage in the 90s, man. Yep, tighten up supply chains, abolish branding, produce according to need and not to excess, abolish rent seeking. Yeah, there's all kinds of things that we can do. There's all kinds of things. We need to build systems of interdependence outside of the capitalist system. Yeah, garden. In this era of deep evil, gardening itself is a revolutionary act, right? Growing your own food, growing food for people around you, right? Creating gardens. It's they don't want to see it. They're not interested in it. Possible major rail strike in the U.S. in the offing? I hope so. I hope so. It's Dr. Squatch. Fantastic, bud. Yeah, I'm purposefully not doing the Stalin thing, Anemone. I'm thinking of you. I'm thinking of you. You guys can have that in the chat, but I'm not going to engage in it. The Stalin conversation is interesting for some and not interesting for others. And I tend to, yeah, no limited liability, jail for the psychos. Yeah. Just ending corporate personhood would do tons. Okay, guys, I gotta pause for just 1 second. I gotta pee. I hate to do it in the middle of the stream, so enjoy the couch. Enjoy the couch. Maybe Milo will do some barking for you. What do you think, Milo? You gonna entertain the masses? Entertain the masses, Milo. I hope the coach didn't say anything insulting while I was gone. If your leftism doesn't come from a place of love for humanity, it shows. I mean, what's interesting about that statement, Anemone, is like, I don't really have a love of humanity. My love is for creation itself. I think that that's where I root myself more. Not to get like, you know, kind of like, oh, well, about it, but like, the creative force itself is what I spend most of my time contemplating and thinking about. And where I find my place of peace, even if we hit the apocalypse, like even if we hit the apocalypse, is that kind of recognition and realization that the creative force will be fine, and that the force that created us is gaining something from all of this. Like, I think it's easy for people to get lost in the sort of senselessness of all of this, but I don't actually view it that way. Like, I feel like that there is a that what we are experiencing, like, to us it seems so grand and large and huge and overwhelming and massive, but it's not. That it's a necessary component of the nature of creation and the nature of the reality that we're in, and that our place in it is simultaneously random but also placed, and that we can actually all find peace in the idea that this is kind of just a big-ass show, isn't it? That this is just kind of a big-ass show. And eventually, one day, each and every one of us will close our eyes and never open them again. And the show will be over for us. And that's fine. That's fine. And so I guess it's like a love of life itself, a love of creation itself, that the humans are just scared little monkeys with nukes. Like, sometimes I really am like, the ladybugs have it right. The ladybugs have it right. They go around eating plants and shit that's just around. They can fly, right? And they look fabulous, right? I think the ladybugs have it worked out, guys, right? Like, look fabulous, eat whatever's lying around, fuck a whole lot, die. That's the ladybug life. Make sure you look fabulous while doing it, though. Make sure you look fabulous. Yeah. And this is absolutely the truth, Transylvania. The insane pushback on COVID mandates that were really lax and half-hearted to begin with was insane. And it just shows how much people in Western societies have lost all faith in the system. That's the truth. That's the truth. That there are people who are still reporting on like COVID mandate stuff and still talking about COVID stuff now. People who I respect, people who I listen to, and they still are pounding the drum on COVID mandates and still talking about it, still bringing it up. And I when I trace where that's coming from, it really is, we don't trust these guys. We don't trust this system. That for a lot of these guys, there is like a deep connection between like COVID and something like MK Ultra, right? Something like Operation Mockingbird, right? All of this stuff that came out on the Church Commission, right? And it's hard to argue against that, I think. Like, do I think that maybe they're going a bit too far? Sure. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, but your government is literally like running illegal drugging citizens, taking over media apparati, like doing all kinds of crazy shit, right? Like the CIA does all kinds of crazy shit. And for us to just sort of take at face value, like, oh, so we're not supposed to trust the government, we're not supposed to trust Big Pharma, like these are evil institutions that are attempting to dominate and control us. Well, when they hold a vial and say, put this in your body, we're all supposed to go, okay. Like, it's tough for me to be upset about that. Like, I don't get... Like, I see some people are really planting their flag. And again, people I respect, right? They're really planting their flag on fighting against the anti-vax crowd and being a voice that goes in there and tries to kick them in the teeth and all this. And honestly, I just don't... I don't have that kind of antagonistic view against anti-vax types. I really don't. I really don't. Because I find their plight to be quite sympathetic. That, yeah, sure, they're saying a bunch of nonsense. Sure. Like, I accept that. But at the same time, like, I think their skepticism and the reason for their skepticism is real. I think and I'm not offended by it. You know what I mean? Like, I think some people are offended by it and really get angry about it and really fight back and make enemies over it. And I'm just like, no, why make enemies over it? Like, why make enemies about it? Yeah, that more than anything else, when people would rather die and kill each other than obey some simple rules, shows how delegitimized and failed the system is, yeah? Yeah, a healthy society would not react this way. That's the truth, right? That's the truth. Trump was no more or less criminal than any other of the U.S. presidents. He just brought some of the imperialist violence that the U.S. always perpetrates abroad to the U.S. itself. Yep. Well, and I think that he was just sort of that transition is always inevitable. Right? It's always inevitable. Whatever you're doing to other nations, you eventually do to yourself. That's a real life lesson too, by the way. Whatever you're doing to other people, you eventually do to yourself. Right? So if you're reaching out your hand in kindness, if you're trying to help other people, right, it comes back around. Right? But if you're walking around and being an asshole to everybody, right? If you're walking around being a shitbag to everybody, it comes back around. And like, I take something like the fellow from There Will Be Blood, right? I think that most capitalists end this way. They end rich, wealthy, and alone. I think that's the path for most of these guys. After all, what is fascism if not imperialism and colonialism turned inward? Yeah, I've had this conversation before, and I've said, like, seems to me like when we do it to other people, it's capitalism, and then when we do it to ourselves, it's fascism. I mean, dinosaurs. How is the Earth not magical? Yeah, that's right. Dinosaurs. Magic. The Earth does have, like... Have you ever, like... I stopped caring... Like, I really did start believing in the power of the Earth itself when I started to interact with bees. When, like... The more you actually pay attention to the other life forms that exist in this reality, the more you really realize how special this place really is. And special is a good word to use. There is a kind of, like, wonder to it. I don't know if magic is the right word, but it definitely is, like there's a depth. There's a depth to this reality that we don't like to actually think about or admit. Because if we actually did think about it or admit, we might have to concede that there are power structures that supersede humanity. That to me is the thing that we never want to do. We never want to admit that humanity itself is not as power. It isn't the center of power, right? Just how we wanted to believe that the Earth was the center of the universe, right? Until we couldn't. We want to believe that humanity is the center of power on Earth, when it isn't. That the center of power on Earth is certainly the Earth itself. and that we just live on it. Call me selfish. I don't care about the Earth. I care about humanity, and I would like the Earth to not wipe us out. So it would be nice if we could stop pushing it in that direction. I mean, if you want the Earth to stop, to not wipe out humanity, then you should care about the Earth, right? You should care about your mother, right? Like, you should care about the thing that created you. It's very strange to me that, like, the way that we talk about the process of evolution, the way that we discuss it in very clean, like, oh, we were single-celled organisms, and then those single-cell organisms evolved and adapted over time, over the course of millions of years, and then eventually created more complex creatures who then came out of the oceans onto the land, and then over the course of many millennia over time, the reptilian race faded away, and the mammalians took over, and then over the course of time, we became humans, and so on and so forth, and off we go. Right? It's a very clean sort of trajectory of, like, that lets people just kind of like nod their head along. But, like, when you think about it, it's kind of bonkers. Like, if you saw it happen all at once, like if you saw it happen in the course of like a couple of minutes, like it would be astounding. It would be astounding to watch. Like, the Earth spawned us. It created us, right? And you can talk about the happenstance and the randomness and all you want, but it doesn't matter. The Earth is our progenitor. It is the thing that created us. And for us to then turn around and just try to burn it down the way we are, like, it's fucking stupid. And disrespectful. Just disrespectful. Yeah, I find that comforting to know that we were created by powers far beyond the societies that shape us. Yeah. Well, because, like, it reminds me of that Mark Twain quote. I quote it all the time, right? You know, I didn't much mind when I wasn't here. I don't think I'll mind when I'm gone. And there's something to that, you know, that we have a lot of existential dread and a lot of anxiety. But the truth is that, you know, when we're gone, it'll be fine. You know, it'll be like going to sleep. That's all, right? And it is. It's completely fine. Like, what? Do we have, like, FOMO? Is it just fear of missing out? That seems to be all it boils down to. That it's just like, oh, but if I die, then I won't know what happens next in the human show. You know? Well, too bad. How can you care for humanity but not the thing that made humanity possible? Genuine question, yeah? But we are the Earth. The Earth made us. Everything we are is a result of what the Earth made us to be. To me, we are literally the Earth. It made us, caring for the Earth, vice versa. Yep. And, like, there is a theory. Like, this is George Carlin, right? George Carlin said, maybe the Earth created us just so that we could extract the oil. Maybe this is what we are supposed to be doing, right? Like, maybe the human species is actually an evolutionary dead end on purpose. That we exist to create some kind of artificial intelligence, or to create some kind of mechanism, or simply to give Earth access to plastics and oil, right? Simply to extract it and get it into the system. And then once all of that is in the system, the Earth just destroys us because we're no longer a necessary component, right? I think about that all the time. Like, we like to think that we're the center of it, and that the history of Earth and of the universe is intrinsically a human history. That the trajectory of this is that humans go on and expand and grow and create and do this thing and go to the stars and so on and so forth. And we explore the universe, blah, 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 blah. Meanwhile, the Earth is sitting there being like, no. You guys are monkeys, right? You're not intelligent. You have thumbs and enough of a creative ability to communicate with one another, and a kind of curiosity, right? So you've got you've got the ability to interact with the world around you and to alter it. You've got the ability to think abstract thoughts and then articulate those abstract thoughts to one another, and a high enough level of curiosity that you're completely willing to open up Pandora's boxes that you obviously shouldn't, but you're going to anyway, because the truth is that humanity is not very intelligent. We're resourceful, we're clever, we're curious, and those are all fantastic attributes to ensure a species will dredge up oil and get it into the system and all that kind of stuff. And then once we've done that, we die. Just like the dinosaurs, right? Like, how do we know that the Earth... This is all hooba-jooba, but I love it anyway. How do we know that the Earth hasn't created these dinosaurs and all of this kind of stuff and had this whole, like, Jurassic, like, period and all of this kind of stuff to create the oil in the first place so that we, the creative little monkeys that we are, can come along and make the plastics that are necessary to actually create intelligent life? Like, we may be the force that is being used to actually achieve intelligent life, right? Like, there's so much we don't know about this reality. There's so much we don't know, and that we find embarrassing to contemplate. Like, this is something I think about all of the time. How sure are we that the electricity is not alive? How sure are we that the electricity that we're all using, right, to just power lights and televisions and allowing me to communicate with you, well, how positive are we that that electric force itself does not have a sentience of its own and isn't actually interested in the idea of creating some kind of vessel to house its own intelligence, right? That perhaps what the Earth is actually doing with us is getting us to create the vessel to harbor itself so that the electricity can actually be simultaneously of the Earth, but within this machine, this robot, this artificial intelligence, if you like, right? So that it itself, the Earth itself, with the electricity that it generates, can ascend to the stars and go on and do all of the things we imagine we will do. But it turns out we're just sort of the stepping stone to that for the Earth itself, and that it doesn't need us for that. And in fact, if I was the Earth looking at humanity, I'd be like, yeah, you guys doing that would be problematic. It'd be very problematic for you guys to do that. And I think it would be, by the way. I think it would be very problematic for humanity to try to do that. I think there would be a lot of reasons why it wouldn't work. A lot of reasons why it wouldn't work. I don't think that we would get past the first settlement. You know? We would, like, get to Mars. Let's say we did it. The only way humanity gets to Mars and colonizes it with any decency is through the abject and utter destruction of the planet, of the Earth itself. So let's say we did it. We make the Earth completely uninhabitable, but we manage to get to Mars. Well, the very first thing that will happen is some kind of petty power struggle, right? And petty power struggles like on Earth, you know, is one thing. A petty power struggle like that happens on Mars, you'll destroy the whole operation, right? Someone has a freak out. You put a crack in the side of some biodome or something, right? And everybody gets fucking sucked into space. Like it's far more likely that humanity destroys itself in this kind of settler colony kind of position because we're extremely volatile, emotional creatures. Like, we're not rational. Right? We like to think we are. We like to present ourselves as rational, but we're not. And even moreover, we don't like to admit that, and we don't like to deal with our emotional selves. Right? We don't like to deal with our emotional selves or have those conversations whatsoever. And so it seems to me that if there is a continuation of the project of life, that humanity likely won't be part of it, right? That we'll create some AI or create some artificial intelligence or some technology or something like this, and that'll be the thing that carries on, right? Because the electricity itself is likely alive and is likely generating the desire and likely has the desire to expand itself, right, into the universe. Like, it doesn't care about humanity expanding itself. The Earth cares about expanding itself, right? That's all just a thought experiment, though. That's just me talking. Call me easily entertained, but there are beautiful things around us. Trees, flowers, birds. Yeah, of course. Of course. Why do we have pets? Little life forms that we just keep around us that scrabble and look stupid and adorable. I mean, we need the Earth to survive. There's no other option. There won't be any terraforming of Mars or any fantasies like that. It's for tens of thousands of years, so let's not kill ourselves. Yeah, like, until we actually get our shit together on Earth, there's no exploration of space. Not anything serious. Like, there's no such thing as a spacefaring, warring people. It's just not going to work that way. That's one of the things that I've come to think about. Like, space is way too unforgiving, right? Space is a ruthless environment. Way more ruthless than we can even get into our brain space. It's a fucking miracle we got there. It's a fucking miracle we got to the moon and back. Like, these are literal miracles. Like, absolutely astounding. The idea that we're going to just, like, be a spacefaring people and, like, go around and colonize and all that kind of stuff, it's a nice little fantasy, but space is ruthless, cruel, and unbending. Like, there is no fuck around and find out. Like, if you fuck around, you're done. And you're not going to make it if you're in conflict with yourself, right? If the Chinese are trying to get a moon base and the Americans are trying to blow that moon base up, right, we're never going to get anywhere. It's very, very straightforwardly. Like, we're never going to get anywhere. You should talk about the hundreds of workers being exploited in Qatar, building the soccer stadiums. Yeah, they'll give 7-year prison sentence if you have sex with an unmarried partner. Yeah, West doesn't care. Yeah, dude, why are we building soccer stadiums? Like, what the fuck is that? Like, literally here in the city of Toronto, we're having, like, we're hosting some event, and it's like a multi-million-dollar thing. We're spending all this money on it. And I'm just like, why? Like, it's just a wank. It's just a total wank. So instead of actually housing people, instead of resolving homelessness or anything, we're just like, let's spend $100 million so people can watch people kick a ball. Like, really, that's what we've done. Like, we're going to spend $100 million so that guy can throw a ball at that guy. Oh, by the way, just step over the homeless people, right? The algorithm got your impression. Fantastic. I refuse to get into a debate. I mean, yeah, there is that. And re the Stalin conversation, just very briefly touching back on it. Watson, you're too well read. You know too much, okay? Dude? So when you start talking, we're all like, oh my god. The ruling class, through Doug Ford, seems to be intent on privatizing the healthcare system, using the pandemic as the reason. They don't even have a reason anymore. They don't even have a reason anymore. Like, they don't care. They don't give a fuck. Here's a great picture that comes from Vancouver, by the way. Right? Homeless people asking a very straightforward question. But John, that rationing would require some actual economic planning for a change, which is a big no-no. Yeah, we can't cause market imbalances. We can't mess with the invisible hand of the billionaires. Yeah, let chaos reign, right? You gotta just let chaos reign. Forget about the planning. right? Forget about ideas and thoughts, right? Forget about a vision for the future. Forget about even the good ideas that would actually help the billionaire class. Like, this is how insipidly stupid these billionaires are, is that a high-speed rail system would help them. Like, this is how childish they are. A high-speed rail system would help them. It would make their distribution chains stronger. It would make their distribution chains faster, more reliable, right? It would open up all kinds of opportunities for expanding into all kinds of new markets that they weren't able to do before. It would create new opportunities for people to have economic growth. It would create new economic markets, right? But the hard reality is that they don't care about any of that. They care about the money they have, right? And if you turn around and say to them, give us some of your money and we'll eventually give that money back with a little bit more extra money, they just don't care. They just want to keep the money. And they are. Very straightforwardly. They don't give a fuck about any of this, the idea of growing a nation or civilization or creating even new markets or market chain or any of this capitalist bullshit. They don't care. People like Warren Buffett don't actually care. People like Bill Gates don't actually care. They care about being princes and being kings. That's what they actually care about. If they actually gave a fuck about any of this, they would have built a high-speed rail system decades ago. They would have looked at China and looked at what China was doing and be like, oh shit, we got to do it. We got to do it. Right? But they don't care about America. They never have. Yeah, not to mention the manufacturing of an electric vehicle produces pollution in itself. Well, we don't exactly have all like the resources to do it, right? Don't forget, good to see you grinning, don't forget that whenever someone gets effed by capitalism, there's someone else doing the effing. Yeah. Yeah, the fact that these losers claim we have no money when 28 months ago the ruling class allowed for the largest upward transfer of wealth in history. Yeah. How are you gonna pay for that? Yeah, exactly. How you gonna pay for that has got to be the dumbest shit of life. Like, what are you talking about? How you gonna pay for that, right? And it's led us into a period that can only be called total dumbfuckery, right? I was just thinking about this yesterday. Like, the most prominent voices in our society today are people like Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, right? These are some of the more prominent voices that exist in the society today. We live in an era of total dumbfuckery. And essentially, if you break down what they have said to us, it's basically shut up and deal with it. That's essentially the nugget of if you took all of their stuff and boiled it down and carved away all of the nonsense, carved away everything they said, it's basically just shut up and deal with it. Like, that's literally what they're saying. And we're just in this moment of complete stupidity and dumbfuckery where we're pretending like these idiots have anything interesting to say. And this question of how you going to pay for that, like, where is it led? You go, how are you going to pay for that? What are you talking about? There's been this extraction of wealth to the very top. Well, they earned it. So you're in dumbfuck territory entirely, right? You're just immediately talking to a sociopathic serial killer, right? Like, hey, don't kill people, but I earned it. Like, it's the exact same conversation, right? I took my knife and I killed them, and if they didn't want to be killed, then they should have fought back, right? The only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is with a good guy with a gun, and he didn't have a gun, so I was able to get him. I earned it, right? Like, I would love to have a conversation with one of these guys and get them to argue against the fact that we shouldn't allow serial killers to kill people in the society, because I would use all of their arguments. That's what I would do. I would just stand in front of them and I would just like, but I earned it. Well, no, I don't. Who rules, laws? Whoa, what about this freedom, dude? Hey, well, I should have the freedom to be able to do that, right? Like, the idea that there's some kind of larger moral kind of conversation, they're not capable of having that discussion, right? And they don't want to. Because at the end of the day, their entire ethos exists to just look at poor people and people of color and say, shut up and deal with it. Stop complaining. That's their entire statement. That's why they have no ideas. That's why they have no thoughts. That's why they're boring, uninteresting losers. Because at the end of the day, everything they're saying is just a reframing of shut up and deal with it. Stop complaining. Toughen up. That's all they are. They're nothing else. So if you present an obvious problem that needs to be solved, like, hey, the people of Flint, Michigan should have water, right? They should have clean water, right? They have no solution for you, right? Because they don't want there to be a solution, because they don't care, right? It's all just shut up, stop complaining, toughen up, right? Which is all they're saying the whole time. And if you say, like, we could easily, like, use a small amount of wealth that we have and resolve this issue, then how are you going to pay for that? Well, Elon Musk is worth $300 billion. The issue costs $6 billion to fix, but he earned it. And I got to tell you, like, I'm really at a point now where I'm willing to say to these guys, look, there is no justification for withholding clean drinking water from people. And if someone's going to stand up in front of me and withhold the capital required in order to to provide the clean drinking water to fellow citizens, then we're going to take the capital away from them. Very straightforwardly. There is no justification. I understand that they think there is one because they're psychos, but there is no justification for withholding clean drinking water from fellow citizens. It doesn't exist. And if the justification comes down to, well, I have the money and you don't, then we're going to take it from you. Straightforward. Easy. And if you refuse to present a solution, right, then sit down and shut up, old man. You're not welcome in the conversation anymore, you fucking nightmare psychos. Go read your Bible. Like, how are we going to pay for that? It's literally just something a psychopath says at this point, and we should treat it as such. It's gaslighting. It's just a way to gaslight people, right? And that's all these guys ever do, right? They take an issue that can only be resolved as a social issue, right? It can only be addressed as a social issue, and they pretend as though it's an individual issue. It's gaslighting. That's all it is. That's all they are, right? It's not like individualism is inherent to us either. We would have gotten as far as we are today without collectivism, empathy, altruism. Well, here's something I was thinking about just yesterday. The argument of individualism is incoherent, and you don't need to go into like a big historical analysis, right? You don't even need to talk about what happened like 50 years ago. You don't need to talk about redlining. You don't need to talk about this. You need to simply observe the life of a human, right? Of the person. The person that's standing in front of you saying, it's the individual that's got to individualize their individualism. Well, you were randomly generated, right? You didn't choose, right, where you spawned, right? That's correct, right? I haven't lost you with that statement, right? That you were randomly generated. You didn't pick where you are, right? And then for the first, 10 years of your life, right, you were basically just an incoherent, babbling baby, right? You didn't have any idea what was going on. You're just literally absorbing what's going on around you. And obviously formed by the environment and the society that exists around you. Right? Obviously. Like this is like the ideology of individualism is observably false simply by taking a look at the life of a person. Forget about history. Forget about any of that analysis, right? You're randomly generated. You don't choose where you start. And for the first 10 years of your life or more, you're helpless. You're just a helpless little baby that can't do anything, right? You're completely reliant on your society and on what's going on. And the idea that those years are not extremely formative to who you are and give you the platform that you can begin to operate from is baby-brained. You've got to be, like, brain-rotted to think anything else. And this idea that, you're just an individual individualizing your individualism is just another form of gaslighting. It's just a way to tell people who are saying, hey, why don't the people of Flint, Michigan have clean water, to shut up, stop talking about it, stop complaining, toughen up. That's all it is. And that's how it should be treated, and that's how we should be discussing it. And it's not something, like, we should only take it we should take it as seriously as we would take a serial killer, right? But we wouldn't take that advice, right? We wouldn't listen to what a serial killer would have to say in regards to how to structure anything. And so I don't know why we're listening to this, because it's so observably falsifiable, right? This is what's embarrassing about these guys, is that they keep standing up and making statements that we're supposed to take seriously as if they're adults that are trying to help or be serious, when at the end of the day, everything they say is observably falsifiable immediately. They're not interesting. They're not trying to help, right? They're literally just telling you to shut the fuck up. Anti-vaxxers blocking hospital entrances in Melbourne, not unlike pro-lifers blocking abortion clinics. Yeah. Confused people everywhere. I can understand why they have a total mistrust of the government. That is totally justified. Correct 99% of the time. It just so happens they are wrong on this one. Yeah. Did anyone see the mayor of Peterborough's response to some idiotic citizen's arrest? Yeah. That wasn't today, but there was a citizen's arrest attempt by the PPC QAnon losers, and I believe that it was it was very colorful language that got used. It was like, fuck off, fuckwads, something like that. Yeah, the fact that the government not just mishandled the pandemic, but purposefully sacrificed regular people's lives and health for corporate profits, yep, further entrenched the admittedly justified mistrust. Yep. Ironically, I think if Western governments had behaved more like China, there would have been more initial pushback, but the long-term credibility of the government would have gained a boost from success. Well, no, it was a lost cause from the outset, Transylvania, right? For literally 50 years, since the 80s at least, the narrative has been government is the problem, right? That's been the entrenched lie that has come from the neoliberal establishment. Government is the problem. Government is the problem. Government is the problem. Get your government hands off my Medicare, right? Government is the problem. So I don't think they could have. I think that if they came in strong and attempted to do something, there would have been a massive blowback from that. Because we're living in an era where there are literally people who, the whole libertarian movement is like this, where their entire argument is things have gone wrong, the government is the problem, we just need to do capitalism harder, right? That's their whole argument. And those guys are well armed. And so if you started to roll in and try to tell them to stay in their homes and all this kind of stuff, they'll shoot back, right? So it was a lost cause from the outset. And this is why you don't run grifts on your populace. This is why an organization like the CIA is the largest terrorist organization on the planet and shouldn't exist, right? That the American government has lost credibility, and it lost credibility a long time ago. And literally presidents of the United States of America said that the government has no credibility. This is what you get. This is what you get. Yeah, don't forget those who tortured Iraqis are now patrolling the streets, yeah? Now we live with the worst of both worlds. COVID was allowed to kill millions of people, and the way it was handled was so purposefully incompetent that people will be even less inclined to follow safety guidelines next time. Compton, very simple statement. Fuck anti-vaxxers. The West doesn't have a government anymore protecting its people, though. It's capitalists all the way up. They're not even capitalists, though. They're just oligarchs, right? They don't. They don't believe in the idea of capitalism, right? The idea of capitalism is like make a better product, provide a better service. That's not what these guys do, right? Sorry, guys. Sorry if any of you are listening with your ears. Milo, you can't bark so loudly. You can't bark so loudly. People's poor little ears. People's poor little ears. He's so playful, guys. He's got a little toy here, and he's like fighting. He's like, fight with me. Yep, Keffel's the communist. Good to see you, Konsenkos. Thanks for this update. Keffel's the communist has had to go into hiding again as Nazis tracked down her hotel room and doxed her location. That's horrible. What a horrible thing that these police have done. What a terrible thing that the police have done. Right? Which was always the point. Right? Which was always the point. Right? That they, under no circumstances did they need to dox her the way that they did. Right? Like, the fact that those cops that did that are not currently being charged with crimes, like, take a look at what it's done. But this is the point, right? This is the point, is that now she's going to be harassed by Nazis, right? Which is the point, right? Police and Nazis are just harassing her now. And do you think she's going to be able to organize and win elections and be part of a community while all this is going on, right? If anything, it's just an effort to chase her out of the community, which will likely be successful, right? And this is the Canadian way, right here. You're seeing it in real time. Like, we're collapsing into fascism, very straightforwardly. And Keffel's story, in my perspective, is absolutely indicative of that. Like, she's not being allowed to have safety and peace. She's not allowed to have any of that. She's being harassed by cops and their Nazi buddies. Right? Why? Because she's a communist and she's trans. Like, it's extremely straightforward what's happening to her. And we're all just watching it happen. And the cops that are doing it, right, are probably laughing about it in the locker room. Yep. Methane writes, everything they do is in the name of profit, not anything good for people. They just don't care. As long as nobody can prove something they sell is harmful, that's the bar. Well, and not even that, though. Like, nobody can prove something is harmful. Like cigarettes, for example, right? Like, if you stand up and say that it's harmful, they'll launch some big lobbying campaign. And it'll take 20 years. And even after you figure it out, what's the result? Oh, you just slap a sticker on that. Cigarettes cause cancer. Yeah, that really saved the day. What I mean is that if it was actually possible to escape Earth 2.0, I would not be too sad about losing this one. But that is clearly not happening anytime soon, so let's preserve this one for now. And I, for one, don't buy into the personification of nature, Mother Earth, whatever you want to call it. I still doubt whether humans actually have consciousness, just the illusion of it. Oh, now you're going deep into the philosophy of all these kinds of things. Yeah. But rocks and electrons certainly don't. You sure? Well, that's a fairly certain thing to say. What is the alternative to not destroying ourselves or the planet eventually ending? Because or not because of human beings? What other phenomena lives forever? Yeah. There's an interesting question, right? All things die, right? All things die. Interstellar space is not so empty. Space is still big, really big. We should kick balls. Rich balls. Generation Y me keeping the eye on the prize. We're all talking about space and like the exploration of space and is electricity alive and all this like philosophical stuff, and Generation Y me is like, we should kick balls. Rich balls. You got it, bud. Good for you. Keeping us on track. Yeah, there's a ton of extremely deadly radiation in space that will be a huge obstacle to any significant space travel. Absolutely. Mini meteorites, yet you won't even see coming till they've already punched a hole in the ship. Yeah. Like, we're not going to live. Like, we're not going to go to fucking space and be cool with it. Like, that's not going to happen. Yeah, and it's also not the solution to our problems. Yeah, like we're a long way from going to Mars. Absolutely. I actually think one of the worst things that humanity could do right now would be to start mining asteroids and shit. I think it would be a terrible idea for us. Like, we're yet to prove that we can handle the resources we have, right? And we're saying we're going to take some of those resources and use them to go harvest other resources on asteroids, right? And it's like, how about no? Like, how about we stabilize our own society first? I'm confident they'll solve mini meteorites problem really quickly because it's a weapons defense system too. Deflector shields. Fuck yeah, let's go. Going to the moon was like visiting the house next door. That was easy mode comparing to go to another planet. Going to another solar system is basically impossible with current tech, yeah. I don't know. I think China may manage to send some people there in a few decades. But it'll be like a moon landing. Do it a few times, leave, never go back again. Early in Shen Bapiro's career, he wrote an article being like, I don't care that civilians are dying in Afghanistan, and the news reports about those deaths annoy me. Yeah. No, he hasn't changed. Yeah. Dude, Ben Shapiro has a section on his website that's called The Positions That I've Changed or something like this, right? Where he lists all of the positions that he once held that he no longer holds. And if you go and look at that, it's horrifying, right? And like, he does it as a way to actually say to people, look, I've changed. Look, I used to hold these positions and now I don't. I'm capable of intellectually changing. And literally his positions were like, genocide is fine. No, I don't think genocide is fine anymore. Bro, I hate to break this to you. If at any point you were walking around saying genocide is fine, you probably are not a serious person we should pay attention to. Just gonna let you know that, like, I'm not that invested in this, in the method you're choosing to pursue your personal growth. And if you are genuinely saying in front of me, yeah, it's such a good thing, I used to think that genocide was bad, but now I don't. Or genocide was good, but now I don't. Then I'm going to tell you straight out, you're just kind of a little kid who's using this as a way to pursue your own self-growth. Maybe just read your Torah, right? Sit in silence and contemplate and keep your mouth shut. That's probably the best advice Ben Shapiro will ever receive. Their intention was all along to completely discredit the whole concept of government, and if you purposefully ensure the government always fails, it's a pretty efficient way of achieving that, yeah? Rich kick balls and arse. Kick rich balls and arse. Yeah, you got it. I love that none of you, just pointing this out for the regulars in the chat, I adore that none of you bit down on the electricity is alive. No one ever does. No one ever does. I say it, and everybody just goes, and walks away. No one tries. No one tries to come at me. No one even says you're an idiot. Shut up. No one says anything ever. I think it's fascinating. I'm actually fascinated by this. That I'm literally sitting in front of you, saying, have we actually put any thought into the idea that the electricity might be alive, that the electricity is an energy source that we're using to like power shit, and it might be sentient? And has anybody actually said, oh, is that what you were, okay, all right. I just, you said you don't believe that? Okay, but like, why? Why don't you believe that? What's leading you down that path? That the very force that's responsible for creating us is not itself. Oh yeah, it's definitely interesting in that regard. Incidentally, this will be a theme that is going to creep into the book that I am writing, Necromancer. Thank you. I have finished chapter 1. Thank you. I'm an author. It's the greatest. Necromancy. I think necromancy is fascinating. I think we're just going to chalk this one up as a truth we hold as self-evident. Oh, well, if the monkeys think it's self-evident, then it's definitely the case, right? Necromancy is super cool, dude. It's something that I, like, finally have admitted that I'm just going to embrace about myself. Anytime I do anything, I'm just like, anytime I play any video game or anything, I'm just like, how can I be a necromancer? Can I be a necromancer in this? How do I do that? And then when I don't be a necromancer, I'm like, yeah, I could be a necromancer instead, right? Especially juice necromancer, yeah. What about water that remembers? What you think about that? I'm going to need more than that, methane. Water that remembers. Water that remembers what? Like, water that remembers that you swam in it? Like, I don't even know what you're talking about there. The waters remember. Right? And then you just hear the call of a loon. I used to be able to do this at a moment's notice. Huh? Huh? All right, here we go. Before we get into the conversation about necromancy, ad inserted. My apologies. I don't like doing it. It's not my favorite. Mummies, kind of old school necromancy, but hey, I'll take it. Yeah. Mummies aren't exactly the same, though, as necromancy, I think, right? Like, necromancy implies, like, that you're a necromancer, right? You're raising skeletons, you're talking with the dead, right? You're projecting yourself astrally, right? There are all kinds of, like dealing with the dead. Whereas mummies are kind of like a different thing. You don't control mummies. There's like a mummy curse, right? So they're slightly different. But I suppose who's putting the curse on them? Probably a necromancer, right? Oh, dude, vampires used to be cool and now they're lame. Absolutely, dude. Vampires are the lamest. They're all lame. No exceptions. There's no such thing as a cool vampire anymore. Like, and whenever they make a movie about vampires are basically just like fodder now. Like, you're like, oh, it's a vampire. Oh, well, you just stab it. It dies, right? Like, you push it into some sunlight. They're basically just like goofy idiots most of the time. They're not scary. They're not threatening, right? Like, and I hate the way they're presented every time. And I think and I've talked about this before on the stream. Yeah, I've talked about this before on the stream. Like, if I'm a vampire, right, an immortal demon, essentially, like half human, half demon, right, and I even catch, like, the whisper that someone's figured out that I'm a vampire, and that they are going to come and hunt me, right? If I even sort of figure that into my equation of how to survive and live my life, that, oh, this guy is hunting me, and he's even in the same city as me, right? Why would you not just disappear? Like, this is the thing that just kind of flabbergasts me about the vampire story, is that why would any vampire ever, at any stage of being a vampire, think that confronting something that is trying to hunt you is ever, under any circumstances, a good idea or necessary? Like, unless it's like they're also an immortal creature of some kind, and they're going to perpetually be hunting you forever, right? Unless that's the case, then maybe, yeah, you should probably think about orchestrating something. But if it's just a fucking human, leave. Just fucking leave. Like, I don't get this. I don't get why there's ever this, like, oh, the human is coming, we're gonna lay a trap or something. Or like, oh, well, I've got to make sure that when I'm asleep during the day, right, that the hunter can't find me, or any of this kind of shit. I'm just like, what the fuck are you talking about? Leave. Leave. You're an immortal vampire. Go somewhere else. Like, they can't follow you. Like, and they're mortal. Like, leave. It kills me, man. It just kills me. Like, wait for them to die. That's all. Right? Like, and you don't even need to, like, literally, you could have your little empire, right? Your fucking empire of being a vampire over here. And you could have another empire, like, over in China or something. Right? And, like, if suddenly there was, like, some hunter that was coming to get you, just leave. Just fucking leave and go to China. Say, like, yeah, I was the son of that guy. Here's my documents. And everybody goes, oh, okay. Right? And you just pick up your life there. Right? Chilling out with different name, all this kind of stuff. It's going to take him forever to figure this out. Like, the Earth is quite large. Right? Where'd you go? Right? Just leave. And does he have the resources to follow you? Probably not. Why did Sunnydale have so many mausoleums in it? It's a small town, yet like every building in the graveyard is a great big structure. Well, it is built on a hellmouth, right? So one would assume that a hellmouth would inspire a lot of sort of twisted machinations, right? That there was like probably a lot of humans that got like mentally distorted by the power of the hellmouth itself, right? Because the hellmouth exudes its own kind of power, right? Even though it's not open, it's still the mouth of hell. And one assumes that some kind of like ghost or creature or critter or some kind of crazy thing took over these guys and just was like, build the mausoleum, create it, take your family fortune and build unto me a mausoleum the size of a cathedral here in the town of Sunnydale. That seems believable. Just saying, right? Ghosts were ruined for me by that one scene with Patrick Swayze. Just one scene is all it took to make ghosts. So now anytime you see anything with ghosts in it, you're just waiting for Patrick Swayze to show up. Do the pottery, right? Yeah. And then you realize the whole time that it's actually Whoopi Goldberg, right? Because he's just inhabiting Whoopi's body, right? He's like with Demi Moore, and it's Patrick Swayze with Demi Moore, like doing the thing. But really, it's Whoopi Goldberg with Demi Moore, right? Angel better than Spike. Whoa. Gauntlet thrown down. Angel and Spike were both Terabad. I can't really stand either. What? Methane. How dare you, good sir? What is happening in my chat? How dare either of you come into my chat and sully the good name. I don't actually care. It doesn't matter to me at all. If I had to choose, I would choose Spike. Yeah, Angel was not a good show. It wasn't. It just wasn't a good show. The characters were lame. I liked Giles until he started to sing. I love that this is descending into like a Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Look, Buffy the Vampire Slayer is, in my view, one of the great gateway drugs, right? Of fantasy and specifically this kind of lore, right? That like Kevin Smith had a really great speech, and it was in defense of Twilight, right? And he said, we shouldn't rip on people who like Twilight, right? We should, in fact, say to the people who like Twilight, oh, you liked that, right? Well, maybe you should try Buffy the Vampire Slayer, right? And if you like that, maybe you should try some Anne Rice shit. And if you like that, you ever actually read the original Dracula, right? And I tend to view it the same way, although I do gotta tell you guys, I actually did sit down one time and try to watch Twilight. I think my biggest complaint about Twilight was that they forgot to make Bella a character. I think that was probably the biggest problem with that film. Outside of the fact that, like, I had to stop after I realized I was watching, like, 10 minutes of these two people looking at each other. Right? Like, they're just looking at each other with, like, the music. And I'm supposed to be like, swoon or something. Right? I'm supposed to look at it and be like, I guess this is romance, I suppose. I just imagine, like, little 14-year-olds just watching it being like, wow, they're so in love. And here I am, like a grown, like, 30-odd-year-old man looking at this being like, this is creepy. This is creepy. It's creepy, right? Like, the only way I can actually perceive how what is happening in front of me is actually happening is that Edward, I think his name is, has Bella in his thrall, right? Like, Bella's not going along with this because she's like, I'm a sweet innocent girl and I'm interested in vampire. Like, she's obviously been taken in by him as a thrall, right? Like, that's what it's got to be. And so it's not romance, right? It's the opposite of romance. It's actually extremely creepy that, like, this 16-year-old girl is falling for this 100-odd-year-old vampire. Like, and obviously he's, like, got her in his thrall and is grooming her the entire time. Like, and I just imagine, like, young women watching this and being like, I with Bella. And I'm like, do you, though? Like, do you wish you were Bella? That, like, you're really a big fan of the idea that someone's gonna come in and, like, control your mind, which is what a thrall is, and then send you into this, like, mad journey where you're, like, Bella is clearly his plaything. Like, he does fucked up things to her all the time that we're all supposed to look at and just be like, that's so romantic and normal. No, it's not. It's not romantic and normal. It's creepy and weird, and it's creepy that little girls loved this shit. It's weird. It's weird. I hope that there's someone in the chat that's hearing this being like, I loved Twilight when I was the girl. When I was a little kid, I loved Twilight. What's the defense of Twilight? It just seems like the kind of thing that you maybe liked when you were little, and then when you got older, you look at it and you go, oh, this is fucked up. Like Revenge of the Nerds. When I was a teenage kid, I thought Revenge of the Nerds was a hilarious romp comedy. I thought that it was great. It was presented that way to me. Everybody thought it was that way. And then I've gone back and watched Revenge of the Nerds again, and my response to it is, yikes, 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 yikes. How was this ever put in front of me as, like, a teenage boy with people being like, well, boys will be boys, right? If you're unfamiliar with Revenge of the Nerds, okay? There's a scene where the nerds, who you're supposed to like, they're the protagonists, the sympathetic protagonists, run a panty raid on the sorority girls, who admittedly are bitches, right? You're not supposed to like them. They run a panty raid on them and install cameras in the sorority house so that they can spy on them, right? As they change their clothing and do all kinds of other various things. And it gets better. It gets better. And the main nerd guy who's had a crush on one of these sorority girls the whole time. They all go to a carnival, a costume carnival, a Halloween carnival. He dresses up in the same costume as her boyfriend, tricks her into believing that he is her boyfriend, has sex with her in one of the carnival rides, like the bouncy castle or something. She doesn't realize it until after they're done, and she's okay with it. She's totally down. She's completely like, oh, well, that was great. And then, as the lore goes, because they made a bunch of these. They made sequels. There was a cartoon series that came out of this, right? There was a television show, I think, at one point. She and he marry. So, I guess the moral of that story for young men growing up in the world is if you really like a girl, what you gotta do is trick her into having sex with you. And then you have true love. Like, no wonder we have, like, this fucking feminist movement and fucking Me Too and all this shit. Like, anytime I hear any of these fucking comedians complaining to me and complaining around me about, like, well, it's gone too far and wokeism and all this kind of stuff, fuck you. Go watch fucking Revenge of the Nerds. A movie that glorifies installing cameras and spying on naked women and raping them. Shut up. And that's a comedy. We were all supposed to be like, ha! Got him. Like, yeah, we needed it. We needed the Me Too movement. We definitely, like, looking around at the movies I was watching when I was growing up, I'm like, yeah, maybe a Me Too movement. Probably a good idea, right? Probably a good idea. Yeah. What's the pisser, of course, right? The pisser, of course, about Revenge of the Nerds is that if you were to lift out those scenes, right, it would be really good. Like, it would be really good. Like, if instead of, like, running a panty raid on these girls, they did something else. Like, they ended up getting a pie in the face, or they fell into a pool or something. Like a pool of, I don't know, like of mud or something, right? Or, and then instead of, like, the rape scene, it was just, like, he did something sweet for her and convinced her, right? That he was actually a really good guy and that the guy she was with is an asshole, right? That would have a kind of emotional catharsis, and it actually would have pivoted it really nicely. Like, you could redo Revenge of the Nerds basically shot for shot and just kind of, like, clean those moments up. But people these days are too sensitive, you know. Yeah, people these days, who doesn't want a good rape scene in a movie for us all to point and laugh at and be like, he got her. Like, yeah. At Ace Ventura Pet Detective. Every time I talk about Revenge of the Nerds, Ace Ventura Pet Detective gets talked about. Dude, the transphobia of Ace Ventura Pet Detective is impossible to ignore. It's impossible to ignore, right? Like, it's the butt of the joke. Like, the entire trajectory of the entire film lands on fuck trans people. That's the entire joke. That it does remind me very much of, like, I have a background in theater. I have a degree in theater. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's why I'm doing this. I'm a useful citizen. There's a play called The Merchant of Venice that you cannot mount. It does not work. I've seen it mounted on 3 occasions, and every single time it has been a failure. And even when the director mounted it fully aware of why the play doesn't work and worked as hard as he could to pivot it and to change it and to mold it and got good actors well cast for the roles, it simply doesn't work. Because The Merchant of Venice is a play that assumes that the audience that's watching it is anti-Semitic. All of the humor that exists in The Merchant of Venice, including the ending, the cathartic ending of the piece, assumes that the audience is anti-Semitic and assumes that the audience will think that the ending, which is Shylock converting from Judaism to Christianity, right, that the comeuppance he receives is just and right. And that we will all look at one another and be like, yeah, we got him. The Jews got to be a Christian now. Get fucked, Jews. Like, straight up. Like, that's and something like Ace Ventura, exactly the same thing. Like, if you tried to end your movie with the way they ended Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, and Ace Ventura: Pet Detective was like big shit. They made a sequel. There was a cartoon, right? Like, Ace Ventura was one of the like iconic characters of the 90s. Huge character. Spawned a career for Jim Carrey. The Mask, right? Which, incidentally, The Mask, great movie. Great movie. Stands up. Still good. What do you got? He got The Mask. He got a whole slew of movies after this, right? And then he started, like The Truman Show. He started to do more dramatic shit. Liar, liar, yeah. And he was always like, I wonder why the Academy's ignoring me. Bro, you are not recovering from Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. You're not. Like, you're never going to recover from Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. Simple as that. Sad thing, a lot of people still don't get it. Me Too was not enough. Yeah, like every other social movie, it was defanged by liberals, co-opted by capitalism. Yep, that's definitely true. Like, that's definitely sort of the sad truth of Me Too. And then, of course, there are moments where the movement gets in its own way and undercuts itself, right? Like, that definitely does happen. And there's no sense pretending like it didn't. He went a little crazy at one point, though, when he was hard on Aung San Suu Kyi. I don't know what this is. Ligandi says, I learned about Bill Gates' life when he was in college. He did some Revenge of the Nerds type shit. Yeah, he is a creep after all. Yeah, been on Epstein's Island. Yeah. Yep. He's a big painter now. Kind of off the deep end still. I think Man on the Moon really fucked him up. Honestly. Like, I feel like he really went... Like... I watched a behind the scenes of the making of Man on the Moon, and Jim Carrey is like one big, gigantic mental breakdown. Really. Like, he said some really he has said interesting things regarding depression and mental illness. That I don't want to disregard those things that he has said, because it's obvious that he is struggling with those things himself. One of the more interesting things I've ever heard him say about depression is that depression is your self getting exhausted with the image you've created. That you can no longer, your consciousness is no longer willing to put in the energy to maintain the image you've curated for yourself. And I think that's fairly accurate. It's not quite what I think is true, but it's fairly accurate. Aung San Suu Kyi was the NED-trained puppet president of Myanmar before the military coup. Cringiest interview ever, if you care to see, is his interview on Norm Live. Well, Norm is kind of cringe to begin with, but in a good way, in a way that's like he rides in it. So, like, I've seen a lot of the interviews on Norm Macdonald's Norm Live show, and it really did feel like a lot of the people he was interviewing didn't know what to make of what was happening. You know what I mean? Like, they just didn't understand what was happening, and they didn't know how to deal with it. And I feel like for someone like Jim Carrey, that's not a good place to be. Like, Jim Carrey's entire life has been creating false versions of himself. You know what I mean? Like, this is actually, like, if you want to think about somebody like Jim Carrey, like, he's always created a series of characters. And the most effective character he ever created was Jim Carrey himself. And this is a phenomenon that I think that lots of people get into. That lots of people are not living as themselves. They're living as a version of, as a curated mask of themselves. And I think Jim Carrey is an expert at it. Built an enormous career of it. That I don't think anyone has actually met Jim Carrey outside of the false image of Jim Carrey, right? So when he goes on Oprah, right, you're just seeing a character, a pretend version of a person, and I think that that's true of all the films he's ever done. Everything he ever did was always just a character that he never, at any point in any of his work, he never actually presented himself, because I think at the end of the day he never really knew or understood who he is or who he was, and that's why I think he's had this big retreat, right? Like I think the movie Man on the Moon really fucked him up. It really, really fucked him up, because he not only decided to play a character, which he usually does, he plays a character, a fake version of himself, right? But he decided to reject all other forms of himself and become fully that character, right? And so he embraced the idea of sacrificing himself to this other character and this other idea of himself. And I think he came out the other, and he's talked about this, so I'm not like making shit up. And he comes out the other side, and he's not, and he doesn't know who he is, because he doesn't know who he is. Like, and that's kind of the truth of it. That Man in the Moon really was like a Dadaist cleansing of Jim Carrey's consciousness, where he comes through the other side and is told, okay, it's in the can, it's done. You no longer need to maintain this character. And he goes, oh, well, I don't really know what to go back to. Who is Jim Carrey? What am I? What is any of this? I think it really fucked him up. And I actually think his retreating into painting is a really healthy way to deal with it. I gotta tell you. Like, pursuing a different art form, something quieter, something personal, something that's just him and the canvas, right? So, something that's still expressive, because he's obviously a very expressive, creative person. Like, that's obviously the case. But something that's not necessarily being done for anyone other than himself. You know what I mean? I think he really wanted to see what's going to come out of me. And so he made things that he wanted to see. And yeah, and I mean, there is this element as well. Like, he's kind of taken on this image of a guru almost. And I feel like this is something I resist in myself a lot. And I'll be honest about this, right? I've seen people do this, where they take on this image of a guru, right? Of like this like knowledgeable, wisdom-filled guru type. And I'll admit that like this, what we're doing here, right? There is a bit of a temptation to become, like, for God's sakes, I've got the chakras there, I've got the whole thing, right? Like, I could be a little guru cult, right? I could do it. I see the path for that, where you take on this sort of image of serenity, and you start to talk with the kind of wisdom and the knowledge and of all that kind of stuff. It'd be super cringy if you tried, John. Damn it, Transylvanian! How dare you so easily push over my ambitions? That's just it, isn't it? I say that all the time, the Transylvanian. I think I would have a bigger audience. Straight up. I think if I turned this into a cult, I think I would have a bigger audience. I think that, no, not, you're right, not the current audience. Although I think a couple of you would make the transition, let's be honest. Come on. I won't name names, but I think some of you would come along for the ride. Even if you were doing it ironically, like with a little wink and a nudge, right? No, I think you're right, though. I think self-help guruism is far more popular than what we're doing here, right? Like, what we're doing here, I hope, has more legitimacy in my mind. Because I feel like we're documenting things, right? We're talking about reality. We're dealing with the events of the world as they happen. Taking in that psychological trauma. Major, fine. Yeah, I knew it was you, bud. I love you too, bud. You're probably my most loyal guy. I think you've been literally, since you've shown up, you've been here the whole time. And I'm happy you're here, bud. So happy. Right? Like, and there are like legitimate crazy things for us to deal with. And as we're dealing with them, like, we're not, like, self-help guruism is different, right? Self-help guruism has a kind of ignorance is bliss quality about it. And that's kind of where I've come to land on, like, that person who talks like this and has this little smile and is offering little tidbits of chicken soup for the soul and all this. It's like, yeah, it's just ignorance is bliss, right? And they're just kind of letting you, and that's why they're so fucking insufferable. Because when they talk with this sort of knowledgeable air, but the reality is that they're fucking ignorant. They don't know anything about what's going on, right? They're giving you their little chicken soup of the soul solutions. A commentator on society, a well-spoken one. Thank you, C.R. Strifey. I think that's not only accurate, but also high praise. Because that's essentially what I'm trying to do. And every so often, somebody asks me, it happened yesterday, for personal advice or any of that kind of stuff, and I do my best. And the advice that I give people is the advice that I should take for myself, and that I pursue myself. And I'm not trying to be above anybody, right? Quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. It's parasocial either way. Streamers, even at the best of times, are never very dissimilar to cult leaders. Transylvanian. All right, let me get my bread hat. Everybody. Ah, ha, ha, ha. Ah, ha, ha, ha. What is that, eh? What do we love about that? We love it. Like, it's obvious humanity loves it. Like, what do we think about that? Like, why do we like cults so much? Like, I think there's a certain degree of in-grouping that happens, where it's just literally I have found a group of people who are treating me okay, and all I have to do is, like, wear this kooky little thing and do a weird little ceremony every so often, and then I have friends. You know what I mean? Like, so the trade-off is pretty easy for a lot of people, I think. You know, if you're like a homeless person, you're a person that doesn't really know anybody, doesn't have anything going on in the world. Like, you think about, like, churches, right? Like, if you're a new immigrant, for example, like, oh, here's a place where people gather, right? And they all come together, and they're coming together based on this idea or this principle, and I don't really care about that, but I'd like some friends. And so here they are, and all I got to do to stay in on the in-group is that when they say, Jesus Christ is coming back at any moment, I go, yeah, great. You know, it seems kind of like, I think that's a big part of it. It gives people a sense of belonging, a sense of meaning, right? I don't know what Heaven's Gate is, dude. What is Heaven's Gate? Of course. It was an American religious movement, often described as a cult. It was founded in 1997 or sorry, 74, 19... It was founded in 1974. I'm the best at doing this. And was led by Bonnie Nettles and Marshall Applewhite. Dude. Bonnie Nettles is, like, on the line, but Marshall Applewhite is fucking a cult leader's name. If you've got the last name Applewhite and you name your kid Marshall, you're basically just calling him, like, cult leader Marshall Applewhite. Like, are you kidding me? Just say the name. Marshall Applewhite. That's a fucking cult leader if I've ever heard one. Also known within the movement as T and Do, respectively. Nettles and Applewhite first... Sorry, man, Applewhite. It's such a good cult leader name. Like, if I was, like, making a movie about a cult leader, the guy's name would be Marshall Applewhite. Like, that's a perfect name. Okay. They first met in 72 and went on a journey of spiritual discovery, identifying themselves as the two witnesses of revelation. Good start. Attracting a following of several hundred people in the mid-70s. In 76, the group stopped recruiting and instituted a monastic lifestyle. Scholars have described the theology of Heaven's Gate as a mixture of Christian millennialism, New Age, and UFOlogy, and as such has been characterized as a UFO religion. Incidentally, I definitely listened to a Joe Rogan podcast where he platformed a UFO guy, and UFOs are real, dude. Like, it's totally real. I absolutely didn't want to talk about UFOs today, but now here it is, and I'm just like, yeah, okay. Even the Time Cube guy got a follower, and he wasn't a streamer, but he would be if he was around now. And we cannot forget the Lord Stephen Christ, who had 3 people and did stream. The Lord Stephen Christ? That's perfect. $1 million question. What is the difference between a cult and a religion? I say it's just the number of followers. There is actually a difference between a cult and a religion. What's the difference? Shoot, I actually knew this at one point. I shouldn't say I knew this, but I actually did have a response to this. Because remember, I was a fundamentalist Christian for a long time, right? And so I would have these big conversations about this very thing, like what is the difference between a cult and a religion? And to me, I think that the difference between a cult and a religion, right, is that a cult, and there can be a lot of overlap here. So if you're listening to what I'm saying and you're saying, but this religion did this, I'll be like, yeah, like there's a lot of overlap. But in my mind, a cult is just when a person is like explicitly exploiting people's weaknesses and these sorts of things for their own personal gain, right? To get money from them or to build like a little personality cult or something like this. Whereas religions are an attempt to, and while there can be cults within religions, certainly, so there's Christianity cults, like certainly, but religions are usually larger philosophies or ways of thinking to attempt to grapple with ourselves and the existential nature of our existences. Like I said, there's a lot of overlap there, but it seems to me like the thing that delegitimizes cults is that they're usually done just to get money from a bunch of rubes, or to glorify yourself. Whereas religions legitimize themselves by attempting to deal with the real existence of the real troubles of humanity, right? Like, people die. What do we do about our own existence and where we stand? And what language do we use, right, in order to discuss these things? And, yeah. and again, like, there is an awful lot of overlap there. So you could definitely end up with, like, cult leaders within. Oh yeah, dude. No, I consider the prosperity gospel evangelicals to be heretical cultists. Like, they don't fucking read their book. They don't give a fuck about the text. They don't care about Jesus Christ, right? They're literally just saying anything they can to get as much money from people. Like, I don't consider them to be even close to religious leaders or anything like this. Like, oh, we forgot to do David Lynch. Okay, let's do David Lynch. Mr. You're a mean one, Mr. Lynch. You're as slippery as an eel. Your heart is made with unwashed socks. Come on, guys. Come on. What do we got? We got an 8, we got a 7, we got a 3. I am definitely picking a 10. I'm doing it. I'm going big. Going big on a 10. 8, 7, 3, 1. Another 3. All right, here we go. I hope it's a 3. 2 of you have a 3? There's not that many of us in the chat right now. Makes sense. Here we go. Here we go. Come on, Big 10. Oh, he's really rotating it. It's probably an 8. I am connected to the power of the universe. Did I get it yesterday? Did I get it yesterday? I feel like I also got it yesterday. Was it yesterday or the day before? I am not... How dare you, Transylvania? How dare you, sir, accuse me of cheating at something as important as this? Okay? David Lynch's number draw is a holy and sacred event that we are all gathered in. This really matters, okay? So how dare you accuse me of cheating? How dare you sully the prestige of such a important existential moment such as this? Can you imagine if I did, though? Can you imagine? Like, how fucking petty am I? How petty am I? Like, before every stream, I'm just going to take a look at the number draw, and then I'll pick the number, and everyone will think I'm super lucky. Like, what the fuck? That's some petty bullshit right there, dude. Like, I can't think of anything pettier for a person to do than, like, pre-watch a random 1 to 10 number draw for nothing. There's no prize. Like, I didn't win anything, right? I didn't get anything, right? Like, I think the most that anyone could get from this particular number draw the most anyone could get from this particular number draw is just like an odd sense that something unusual has happened in their life and they don't understand why. And that's it. That's everything that David Lynch has given the universe is essentially that. Just like, you don't owe the audience an explanation, just show them. Let them figure it out. The thing that's great about that, the thing that people don't know about God is that he's gay. Do you care to explain that? No. Yeah, that's right. Some days I've got to get it wrong, maintain the illusion of legitimacy, right? I've got it all worked out, you guys. I have a whole chart, right? And you find out that as I have charted it out and figured out how to maintain this ruse that it's just like not different than just randomly picking a number. I love this idea. I hope this sticks. I hope this one sticks. I hope that you guys never, ever believe that I am picking these numbers randomly. Yeah. Statistically, I should have got it by now. Ah, methane. That's interesting all by itself. Maybe David Lynch is trying to tell you something. Maybe the odd energy that exists from David Lynch. Maybe you two shouldn't just aren't linked. You know, maybe you and Lynch aren't linked. Unironically, someone could figure it out by simple statistical analysis. Yeah, like, guys, the stakes on the number draw cannot be lower. Like, really, like literally cannot be lower. There's nothing. Well, yeah, they just need a sample size of several hundred. Are you kidding me? If you go into the comments, one of the number one comments every single time is someone keeping track of the sequence. Right? They're keeping track of the sequence. There's the sum. There's the average. There's the median. Here's the frequencies. Right? And then they've even got a days since last picked. Wow. 38 days since a 4 was picked. 38 days. 4's got to come up. I'm picking a 4, man. 4's got to come up. Right? And then people got longest time without being... This is exactly something a David Lynch fan would do, by the way. This is exactly something that a David Lynch fan would do. Like... And he even tells you what his correct predictions have been. This guy is correctly predicting the draw 8.64%. He's got 8.64% accuracy, dude. You gotta like this, right? This is absolutely right. And like, and then what are some of the comments? I love these. 1 in 10 don't want to be your monkey wrench. One more indecent accident. I'd rather leave than suffer this. Foo Fighter monkey wrench. I'm happy for the people whose number was called. And then just guess 6. It was a 10. That's so charming, dude. That's so charming. Oh man. Like, this reminds me of a Frank Zappa quote. Frank Zappa has this really beautiful quote where he goes, "There's something charming about stupid people. Being a little stupid is kind of charming. Being ignorant is not." That's the quote. And I think it's absolutely true. I think it's absolutely the case, man. That when I look back on my life, I think the number one thing, especially when I was like a teenager and in my 20s, the number one thing I wish I have been better about is not being so dismissive of stupid people. You know? That for sure. Like, when I was younger, especially when I was like an evangelical Christian, right? I think I'm better than everybody else from the outset, right? I'm the smartest person in the room for sure. Jesus is coming back at any moment. I'm the smart one. You're an idiot. There was all kinds of people that, you know, they were around me and they were just, well, kind of dumb. You know what I'm talking about. I'm not trying to be mean, right? But these people just exist, and there they are. And I wish that I had just worked to get to know and just accept them for who they are. And I've been doing that in later on in my life, at least since I was 30. And I gotta tell you, wonderful people every single time, right? Little dim-witted, little slow on the uptake, absolutely lovely people. Just completely charming. You love to be around them, because it's like Carl. That Ricky Gervais hangs out with this guy Carl, and he presents you Carl, and Carl's like a little dumb, like, but his perspective on things are so wonderful, so absolutely wonderful and unexpected, right? And maybe I am being a bit dismissive and mean, but I don't mean to be. There is something absolutely lovely about just like charming is the word. I remember when I was in university, there was this young girl who was in one of my theater classes, who everyone thought was kind of dumb, right? Everyone thought, not kind of dumb. Everyone thought she was dumb. Like, no two ways about it. Everyone, like, she always said dumb things. She always told stories that went nowhere, right? But she was always happy and smiling, and she was always nice to be around, right? A beautiful young girl, right? And then we all had to do like a project, a theater project, where we had to present something, right? And everybody had this attitude going into her show of her showing, because a little theater performance that you had to do, and everybody had this attitude going into hers that this is going to be ridiculous, like it's going to be bad, is what we thought. And what she presented was like Lucille Ball level comedy, that it was absolutely brilliant in its presentation. At one point she was standing at least 10 feet off of the ground on a box wearing heels. She was presenting the jobs that she has done throughout her life, right? So she was just going through like jobs that she was doing. And at one point she's like up on this like 10-foot tall box, no supports, no rope, no nothing. She's wearing heels. We watched her climb up on it, and we're all there going like, what the fuck are you doing on this box? and I think back on that, and I think, man, I wish I had just been a lot nicer to her, you know? And it's not that I was like actively mean to her, but just I definitely was dismissive of her because I thought that she was dumb. And so what if she was, right? She was a beautiful person with a lovely soul who definitely created something that stuck with me to this day. Maybe I've revealed something. Maybe you guys are over on the other side being like, oh, John's mean to people. Oh, yeah, well, we all grow. We all shift. We all change. Oh, man. I hope you guys are all doing well on the other side of this. I hope every single one of you is having a good time. This one ended up being more of a faff stream, honestly, which I'm fine with that. I hope you could have used it too. I could have used it. I definitely needed it. These times, man, these times are uncertain. These times are uncertain. And it's just a strange, unusual place to be. It's just a strange world we live in, where there's all kinds of little kooky cults spitting out. There's all kinds of strange situations happening. And it just feels like we're not actually slowing down and trying to deal with any of it. And I hope that's what I'm offering. I hope that's what you guys are taking away. I hope that's what you guys are getting. It's just the chance to kind of slow down, think about what is occurring, thinking about how to get through it. I've got capitalism for the next little bit. Going to my capitalist job, which I can't complain about. I can't. Good people. The people that run it actually care. I don't feel like I'm getting abused. I feel like everything's working out. Always a good opportunity as we close down the stream today. Remember to like, share, subscribe. Tell people I exist. Send it out into the world. I think we'll close this one down a little early. I hope every single one of you has a really wonderful weekend. I hope every single one of you just finds a little bit of peace. Always remember, each and every one of you is a quantum being, walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes that you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity that they want you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.